right, welcome to our listeners. Today, Jeremiah and I want to talk about how do you plan for the unexpected? And even in saying that, we know that there's an oxymoron, right? You can't plan for the unexpected, but life is going to throw you curveballs, and some of them are positive and some of them are negative and not what you expected. And some of them cause a difference of opinion, right? In a household, some might view it as a good circumstance or as a bad circumstance. And as financial advisors, right, we get to come alongside our clients in those moments when we've had this solid plan in place, all the wheels are turning, we're working towards a certain end goal, and maybe there's a hard left, right? Maybe there's something out of their control that shifts what that outcome is. And so what do we do next? And we're going to talk about some different circumstances. So Jeremiah, do you want to kick us off with some things that we've experienced?
Yeah, I'm excited today about this topic of pivoting. And we have some negative pivots. We have some real positive pivots. And the first one we'll talk about is just an inheritance. We had a clients recently that their retirement was going to be tight. They kind of came to us later in life, and we kind of worked through their plan, and that they're going to get through, but it'd be a little tight. Well,
right, they were totally ready to work into their 70s because that's what they expected would be needed.
Yep, yeah, more years of working, absolutely. And so as their parents passed away, they had an unexpected inheritance that kind of came as a windfall, and it boosted their plan in the sense that they didn't have to work anymore. And they, in fact, would have to figure out, what do we do with this extra money to benefit our kids, to benefit community organizations. It's more than they were going to spend anyways,
right,
to get all the
so
way
this
through
is
their
a positive curveball, right?
Yeah.
It kind of feels like winning the lottery, and maybe you don't even have to pay as much in tax depending on how it comes to you. But the reality being that they weren't expecting this, and all of a sudden they have ample.
Yep. And I think that the first one that we realized, and we do this with a lot of clients, like if your advisor, if the financial advisor you work with is just babysitting money, right, and making sure that it's there and you're not losing it, that's one thing. For us, we want to be a thought partner. We want to be a life partner to kind of work through holistically. And so the first thing for this couple, it was great. They sat down and we had to start almost at the beginning to say a vision, to say, if you don't have to work, if the vision you guys had together of what your retirement was going to be, if that's no longer the case, let's start again. And we get down to, and I think what was really healthy was acknowledging the difference. Like if couples just like, okay, this is what we've been doing, we have more money, let's do the same thing. And one spouse is into that, one isn't, right? There's a lot of strife and uncertainty, but it was a good acknowledgement to say, hey, we're in a different place than we were before. Mm-hmm. So because of this difference, hey, do you still want to do what we talked about? Other spouse, do you still want to do what we talked about? And they were able to have a really healthy conversation kind of with us in that space about what they wanted for their future now that they could discuss it in a different way.
Right. And we've had clients who have been in similar circumstances, and maybe it turns them into a spendthrift. They really do feel like they've just won the lottery. And so they're out buying the new car. They're going on that vacation because they've deserved it and they've always wanted it. And we have to have some other conversations with them about like,
right.
whoa, slow your roll. Like,
you didn't get that much.
The value of exponential investment growth over time, but you have to leave that capital invested so that your 90-year-old self will be grateful. They don't really care. Your 90-year-old self doesn't really care if you drive that fancy car today, right? Maybe they do. But in this case scenario, right, it was a couple who had all their life been in a very frugal mindset because they knew they were going to work in the philanthropic space. They didn't expect to earn. They didn't expect to be high income earners in a charitable environment. And so they just planned to continue working, even work odd jobs, right? They were caring for, I know the one spouse was caring for their elderly parents. And so now that they came into all these funds, it's like, so what's our responsibility with this money that we weren't expecting and we haven't earned directly? What's our responsibility to our family? And there's, essentially what they came up with was a plan of how to disperse the various funds and kind of meet all of their needs, some of which were immediate, right? We've got to do some home renovations on our home. Our car is getting older, and so we're going to replace it, right? Some of them were more long-term. Hey, we never thought we could help our kids make the first down payment on their home, but we would really like to do that. And so how and when, they transfer those funds to their kids, that was the sort of conversation that we got to enter into. And they certainly didn't expect to be having that conversation.
Well, I think that after this, kind of the acknowledging the difference, redreaming together, some of those goals, like these new goals they didn't think they could have, putting those in place. And then it starts getting to the strategy, and for us being a part of that conversation, helping them walk through what could be, and they're dreaming a bit. And then we start saying, okay, well, if you're going to give money to your kids, here's the way we recommend that you do it. if you're going to have this money that's going to fund your retirement, here's how we recommend. And, should I pay off my mortgage? All those questions, right? Those are all tactical things we jump into. And yeah, I love that. I think it was a great conversation for them. And it was a really good example of someone who's pivoting, in life. So we have another one. We have a few of these we'll go through. The next one, another recent client is mid or early 40s, been working for years and years, building a business, doing really well. Both spouses are working. Well, the one spouse just recently sold their business. They got a great offer from someone in their industry. They were able to exit. And so now they're 40 with money that they potentially don't have to work, but they've been working and they're used to working and they plan to work and they feel too young to not work. But it's a moment where they are now, I think, having to do this vision to say, okay, things are different. We sold the business. I don't have a business to run. He's still employed by the business, which is great. He has a job for the coming years, but they're financially in a different place. And so I think it's been a really beautiful moment to revision, like, well, what do you guys want when you're 50? What do you want when you're 45? What's ahead of you?
This is the dream that every young entrepreneur shares. They would love to be at this point where they're like, wow, we sold that company for multiples that I didn't expect to. In this case scenario, it was actually a merge of 3 different companies. And so there was an opportunity to stay on as a part of the new team and the larger corporation. And that was the option that this client in particular took. But we have other clients, especially serial entrepreneurs, that say like, hey, I had success with one. Why don't I take the capital that I've got from that? I'm young. I still want to work. I've got like 14 more ideas or 3 more business ventures that I want to invest in, how and when they do that. So it's like all different decisions that don't really become visible until that moment when that sale actually happens.
Yep. And for some folks, they are going to go again, right? They're going to say, yep, I did one business. I'm going to use this as my money and my resources. And I'm going to start another business because they just enjoy that process, right? Others might say, hey, what does retirement look like at 50 or at 40? And go from there. But I think it was a good moment to say that the plan they'd been working on, even though there was parts of this that were expected, it was now a moment for us on the financial planning side to say, all right, all these other plans, we're going to set them aside. Here's the new plan and start working
Mm-hmm.
through those numbers and those calculations. And it was, a really good moment. But even as
Right.
spouses, in this instance, one spouse still works and so does the other. They both have jobs, but their finances, they don't have to have jobs in the same way. So what was hey, I'm going to work till 65 now is becoming a different conversation. They have kids, and so how is this going to impact their kids? I think it's a good moment to reevaluate. And I think couples do this on a regular basis. I know that you and I talk about vision and what's changing on a regular basis, but I don't know that all couples do explicitly. And this might be one of those safe spaces that we create for people to have this conversation about vision, about finances in a way that's not arguing or do we have enough or fear based, but rather hope based, maybe that they can look forward and say what comes next.
What could be true of our circumstance that maybe isn't something we've acknowledged together openly. I mean, a lot of times the first step is to identify some of the differences. If as we start to walk through their plan, it's like, hey, I always wanted to travel, but not really internationally. I kind of want to, just travel the rest of the US and get in the RV. And that's a different plan, right? Than
Mm,
it is to be like, I've always wanted to travel, but I want to go to Italy. I want to go there so often that I can get dual citizenship, right? And it's these layers of vision. And we have a whole grab bag of different circumstances because it's so fascinating what comes up
yeah.
in conversation. And I like what you said about kind of just creating this space where that conversation can happen. It doesn't mean you're solving for anything. It doesn't mean that there's one right answer. It's just like, what seems to be true to you today? What occurs to you today based on all that you know? And a lot of times within a household, it can be different. And so sometimes starting that conversation can feel almost like conflict, but it's like the beginning of unity, right? Like coming up with like a unified plan
Right.
for your finances.
Well, even
So,
surprising yourselves. We had a client, as you mentioned, traveling, that they went overseas, and that's what they expected would be part of their retirement. They'd both retired. They talked about traveling. So now it was their first kind of post-retirement trip. They went overseas. They had a great time. They came back. We talked about, hey, could you do that every year? Could you do that every other year? They both looked at each other and just said no. Like, it was fun, but like it took so much time and effort to plan it. And this was the couple that they after they'd come back from that trip, they were looking at different things, and they have an RV. They tried one of these RV tours where someone else plans the whole itinerary for you, and you kind of caravan with other RVs to different stops and different locations. Some of them even have like tour guides when you get there that are all set up for you. And they absolutely loved it. I didn't even know these existed, but they're these, domestic RV caravan tours. And they loved it. And they just made a comment like, we didn't know that we were going to like this so much. We thought going overseas was what we would love. But they kind of discovered together that they didn't like that as much, but they liked this other version. And I think when people in this, there needs to be, I think, a little bit of space for, I say experimenting, but discovery, maybe self-discovery if there's been a pivot. And some of the pivots that we've dealt with clients are hard. We've had people who they've retired, they're excited to be grandparents, and then their kids don't have kids. And so they don't get to be grandparents in the way that they wanted to be. And that's hard.
Mm-hmm.
And they've had to pivot and discover what they want. There had to be grace between the two spouses to figure out what's next for them. There's a number that have, I guess on the positive side of that same one, we had a client who was all excited to move to Montana. For years and years, that was the plan, retire, move to Montana. And their kids started having grandkids here in California. And they said, we're not leaving. Like, these grandkids are so much fun. We are not moving to Montana. So I had to pivot, but kind of discovering those things that are worth the pivot, or that they, in the midst of a forced pivot, something that you're excited about now.
Right. We have a lot of clients that maybe have a sort of health circumstance that comes up. And so maybe the dream has been to live in a rural place far away from the main city, but all of a sudden being close to a healthcare provider, right, that they prefer, or the specialists that they need, or the facilities that they need, like that's going to alter a plan, and definitely add some expense that maybe wasn't what they anticipated. These unexpected circumstances in our life aren't always positive, but how we choose to incorporate them in our vision has a big difference on the perspective of the individual and the couple. And, there's certainly like low hanging fruit in the context of this whole conversation. If somebody were to come to us and they were to say, I just want to create the safest financial plan ever, right? It sort of doesn't exist, right? Like we can't look in a crystal ball. It's not like Jeremiah and I anticipated COVID. We can't anticipate all these other black swan events that have major economic impact on us as a country and us as individuals. But there are ways to pressure test your plan, right? That's why we talk through multiple different scenarios. There are ways to add some security in terms of the assets that you hold. It depends on the individual. We sort of have this toolbox, I guess I would say, available to us. And so there's products, insurance products like annuities, that have a level of security for the individual that it's not right in every circumstance.
Yeah.
But for many of our clients, or some of our clients, it is the right solution, and it alleviates some of the concerns that they have, right? Do you want to mention a few other ones?
Well, maybe let's even shift a little bit in our conversation. So everyone's going to pivot at some point in their life. Big pivots, little pivots, but someone's going to pivot. So we can talk through some of the financial items that either need to be in place or need to talk about in the midst of a pivot. And so the first one I would say, as we kind of get a little tactile here of knowing, hey, there might be a pivot coming in your life. What do we do? The first I would say are things, the basic financial, financial hygiene, like you should have an emergency fund, right? If you're living paycheck to paycheck, whether you're wealthy or wherever you're at on the scale, if you're living paycheck to paycheck and you have to pivot, that's really hard, right? You have no buffer, no space. So you want to have a couple of months of living expenses saved up in an emergency fund. The second is kind of the way your assets are set up. You don't need to be locked in too soon. And so we see this with things like you mentioned, annuities. Even there's a number of kind of illiquid real estate investments that people get excited about. Hey, I could put money here and it's going to pay me back this much over the next 10 years. Those can be, as you said, Laura, those can be great tools. However, if you deploy them too early or you lock yourself in, they can be really difficult, either timely or cost to get out of. And
so your ability, on your cash flow too, like what are your liquidity needs in the short term? It might kind of solve that for them.
Yeah. So those are hard to move in and out of. And so there's folks, especially annuities, we talk about that. When life is at a certain point and you've built your assets and you want to get away from some of the market volatility, to bring in an annuity can be a really good choice, really good option. However, if you're still, I would say, a little bit younger and life is still pivoting, there's a lot of uncertainty still. It might just be too soon to have that much locked in. So I would say structuring yourself to be a little open. The third I would say that's really important is really just visibility on your finances. And some people do this naturally. I think for a lot of our clients, it's working with us to say, well, what if I move to this state and take this job? Am I still on track? Does that still work? Or what if we pivot and we retire early? We had a client not too long ago that came to us. They got a golden handshake offer. which people, I'm sure they've heard of those. It's when often either an employer or a government agency says, hey, we'd love for you to retire to make space for others, and we will accelerate your benefits by a number of years if you agree to leave now. And so it's, it's a handshake in the sense that you're leaving, but there's some benefits to it. We've had a few clients that have come to us in recent years and say, hey, I was given this offer. Does this still work? And so we had to do the math to kind of understand their situation, their finances, which you already had the base set. But then we said, well, what if you stop working, but you get these benefits instead? So kind of that visibility of their finances or kind of that, I would say that's the hygiene to be ready for these types of pivots.
I mean, I think a lot of times we're asking a lot of questions and it leads us down roads that maybe they haven't tread before. What are the recurring expenses into your household? Well, we think we're this. Well, do you feel like you have this amount of money left over at the end of the year? No, definitely not. Okay, well, where's it going? And not to say that, again, we don't build budgets to shame anybody for how they spend their money, but just visibility, right? Getting to your point about what is it that you're truly consuming and enjoying from the current income that you have, and how much of that are you putting away for your future life in retirement? What does retirement look like? Do you want to move into semi-retirement? Do you want to just I have such a high level of stress right now, I want to move out of this position as quickly as possible. Okay, well, what could be next, right? So a lot of our conversation isn't about the actual accounts themselves necessarily, or the structure. We do spend time with our clients reviewing account performance and investment allocation and all those kind of things, but what's next? Because as planners, we want to get you prepared for it, right? Okay, what do we need to do structurally to make sure that you have everything in place and you have a mindset of peace and security, right, as you step into whatever that next point of your life is.
Yeah, as you shift. And I think all those questions you talk about, and we sit down and people even listening, if they said, hey, if I got an inheritance, what do I want to do with it? It usually takes a little bit of time to think through. A lot of people said, what if I win the lottery? What would I do with it? I'm sure people played that mental game of, oh, I'd do this and I buy that person a house and, all different things. But we find it takes a little bit of time to really decide, would I be okay to stop working? Would I really enjoy that? If I were to stop working, what would I actually do with my day? Would I be floating lost? Would I have, 5 friends I would spend more time with and we'd do all these great adventures together? So I think there's, in the midst of these conversations of pivots, it has to be kind of covered in a bit of grace and extra space to kind of think through. And I'd say the most reasonable or even useful conversations we've had in this space is when we talk through the finances, we as the planners express, hey, this gives you freedom. What do you want to do with that freedom? And the clients put a few things on the board. They think about it. They say, maybe this, maybe that. And they kind of dream a little bit together, out loud. But then they kind of leave. And then when they come back to that next meeting, usually there's some real gold there to say, we thought about it. We talked about it. I am not ready to just quit working, but I am ready to be less stressed. So then we start seeing a vision. Then we start building the kind of tactical, how do we use your finances to get you there? But it takes some time.
Yeah, one of my favorite questions is where, onboarding or meeting a new client, they're going to say how often are we going to meet? And the answer to that is it depends, right? So at the beginning, we're going to meet more frequently as we get your plan set up and implemented. And on average, that takes about 4 to 6 weeks, right? If they're fully committed to the process, our team is all in. We like to tell people it takes about 4 to 6 weeks to get your plan in place. And then oftentimes the wheels are set on the track and the wheels start to get in motion and okay, we're getting to know each other. We'd love to meet on a quarterly basis. And then a little bit farther down the road, they're going to be like, this plan is working. I trust these people. Everything's in place. And we might be the ones chasing you. Hey, everything okay? How's it going? You ready for your next appointment? We might meet twice a year, et cetera. We always tell people we don't want to nag you, but we certainly want to keep in touch or get to know you. And so there's going to be seasons where maybe you don't feel that it's as needed because the plan still works. And then there's going to be a moment where a life event or a circumstance or a curveball comes your way. And that's when it's like, gear up. We are ready, right? Put us in, coach. It's our turn. And so we get those phone calls and, there's no limitation, right, on how often people can come and meet with us because oftentimes it takes multiple conversations to arrive at either a new structure to the plan or what's actually needed or what's the new vision, right? Where are we headed? And maybe some new steps along the way. So I just say that as encouragement to our listeners, that even as adults, it's like you look at small children and I forget what the average is, like a 5-year-old asks 3,000 questions a day or something, right? That feels true in my life right now.
Yeah.
But, the reality is, as adults, sometimes we forget to ask questions because we feel like we're supposed to have all the right answers, right? We're supposed to have it all figured out. To be honest, I think that one of the things that I enjoy about this industry is it necessitates you to be a constant learner. Things are changing all the time. There's as much depth as breadth in this industry in terms of your knowledge base. And I want to bring that to all the relationships that we have with our clients. Like, this is a place where you can ask all the questions. We don't expect you to know everything about your finances, no matter how old you are. We are still discovering as we go along, but we might have some helpful tips. Like, let's talk about it. And the more visibility, the more openness we can have in those conversations, the better we can serve our clients.
Absolutely. And some of these pivots, just as you said, are two spouses who decide to pivot together, and we get to have that conversation. We have a whole other set of topics and clients where one spouse is no longer there. And we're having these pivot conversations with a spouse that we call it the survivor. The spouse that's become a survivor unintentionally, undesirably. They didn't want to be in this position, but they are. And even as we talk with a lot of our clients as they're coming forward and bring on new clients, there's a discussion of, what's good for you now. But if something happened to you and your spouse was just them, who do you want to be their team? And that there's a huge difference we talk a lot in the book, Who Not How, of saying, you trying to figure out how to do it yourself to be a DIYer and get some good tips? Or are you saying, who do I need to bring on my team to really supercharge my future? And often when there's two spouses together, they're thinking, well, maybe we could do it. Maybe we need a teammate. But then often when we talk through with the clients, say the one who is more interested in the finances, if they weren't there, if something happened to them tragically, where would the survivor be left? And what do they need? And often it becomes crystal clear. They don't need a what or what's the tool my spouse needs. No, we need some who. We need some people that are going to come along my spouse to help them revision, help them move forward, help them progress. And we have a decent size of our client base that we used to work with two spouses and now we work with one because one's passed away. And Randy, your dad, who's often on this podcast, I think he has a real sweet spot for caring for surviving spouses to make sure that they don't become vulnerable. They don't get taken advantage of. They have the support. They can ask all the questions. They feel they can take charge of their finances and get confidence in ways that they never did before. So I think it's just a good comment in the midst of, as we get to love, having these big dreams and big excitement pivots, there's also hard pivots. But in either
Mm-hmm.
we want to make space for our clients to sit with them and kind of walk through this.
Right. Let us plan with you through the unexpected. So thanks so much. I hope what we shared today was helpful. And if you need an advisor and someone in your corner, give us a call here at Tricord Advisors. We'd love to get to know you. For today, thanks for listening, folks. Bye-bye. We have a few more things to let you know about before we go. Podcast reviews really help us to serve more people and get this information into the hands of the people who need it. Please leave us a review. Even if it's not 5 stars, we welcome the feedback.
And we invite you to let us know what topics you would like to hear more about or what would benefit the people in your life who you're closest to. We have more resources online. Those resources are designed to help you share this great information easily with people in your life. To access those resources, please visit tricordadvisors.com.
Often we hear from clients that they wish they had talked to us sooner. If that's you, we'd be thrilled to see how financial planning can benefit your life. Email us at contact@tricordadvisors.com or simply click on the link in the show notes.
This show was produced by Graham Gardner at Model FA. Find out more about how to create a podcast for your financial planning business by visiting modelfa.com. We love creating content that's useful, resourceful, and maybe even a little entertaining. We want to make this mega universe of financial topics and advice applicable and helpful to your life.
Remember, at Tricord Advisors, we are your future's best ally.